Yes, hello. I have another message today about focusing on Jesus, and I've entitled this one, Do Not Add or Subtract from God's Commands. If you turn to Numbers chapter 20 and verses 7 to 12, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, Take your rod and gather the assembly together with you and your brother Aaron, and speak to the rock before your eyes, and it will give water for the congregation and animals. So Moses took the rod and gathered the congregation before the rock. So far, so good. Moses was obedient to the Lord. But then Moses lost it. He was tired of hearing nothing but complaining and murmuring. There wasn't too many happy and smiling faces around all those grumblers. Moses had all he could humanly take, and he allowed his focus to drift from Jesus to the whingers before him. And then notice in verse 10 and get his reaction. Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water out of this rock? And with that he lifted the rod and struck the rock, not once, but twice. He was so angry with his complaining, whinging countrymen, he allowed his passions to disobey the instructions of the Lord, which were to only speak to the rock. We are not in a position to judge Moses. I just wonder how many bodies would be lying around if I was in Moses' position. In verse 12, God speaks again to Moses and Aaron as he reveals to them that they are not permitted to lead the people into the earthly promised land, because God said, You set a bad example to the congregation. You didn't believe me, nor did you honour me. And in verse 24 on tells us that Aaron was stripped of his priestly robes, and these robes were put on Eleazar, his son, and Aaron died up there on the top of Mount Hor. In Numbers 27, verses 12 to 13, God reveals to Moses that he will see the promised land, but from a distance, and then he would die. Moses pleaded with God to let him go over into the promised land. In Deuteronomy 3:23 to 27, Moses speaking, I pleaded with the Lord and said, O sovereign Lord, you have only begun to show your greatness and strength of your hand to me, your servant. Is there any God in heaven or on earth who can perform such great and mighty deeds as you do? Please let me cross the Jordan to see the wonderful land on the other side, the beautiful hill country and the Lebanon mountains. The Lord got angry with Moses. He would not listen to me, Moses says. He declared, That's enough, speak no more of it, but go to the top of the mountain and look over the land in every direction. Take a good look, for you will not cross the Jordan River. I think it wonderful that we have stories in the Bible of people who have such open and frank talks with their Lord, even to the point of becoming a nag and wanting their own way. Did you notice in verse 24, He praises God for his greatness and majesty. And then in verse 25, almost cheekily, he asks, "Please let me cross the Jordan to see the wonderful land on the other side, the beautiful hill country and the Lebanon mountains." In verse 26, God is firm with Moses as he encourages him to be content with just going to the top of the mountain, to look in all directions and see it with your eyes. Then Jesus gives Moses his final orders. Commission Joshua and encourage and strengthen him, for he will lead the people across the Jordan. He will lead them into the land you see before you as their possession. Deuteronomy 4, 1-4. Moses gives the people some sound counsel when he said, "Listen as I read. And now, O Israel, listen carefully to these decrees and regulations that I am about to teach you. Obey them so that you may live, so you may enter and occupy the land that the Lord, the God of your ancestors, has given you. Do not add or subtract from these commands I am giving you. Just obey the commands of the Lord your God that I am giving you. Just obey the commands of the Lord that he wrote with his own finger. Don't add or subtract from them." God has given no one the authority to change what he has written. So no one has been given the authority to add or subtract from these 10 commandments. But we are just to obey them as God has given them to us. Moses says, "You saw for yourselves what the Lord did at Balpor. There the Lord your God destroyed everyone who had worshipped Baal, the god of Peor. But all you who are faithful to the Lord your God are still living today, every one of you." And in verses 6-9, "In the land you are about to enter, obey all of these decrees and regulations, just as our God commanded me to teach you. Obey them completely, and you will display your wisdom and intelligence among the surrounding nations. When they hear these decrees and regulations, they will exclaim, 'How wise and prudent are the people of God, for of this great nation. For what great nation has a God as near to them as the Lord our God is near to us whenever we call on him? And what nation has decrees and regulations as righteous and fair as this body of instructions that I am giving you today?' But watch out, be careful, never to forget what you yourselves have seen. Do not let these memories escape from your mind as long as you live. Be sure to pass them on to your children and grandchildren. Never forget the day when you stood before the Lord your God at Sinai, where he told me, 'Summon the people before me, and I will personally instruct them. Then they will learn to fear me as long as they live, and they will teach them to their children to fear me, the God who is full of love, mercy and grace, forgiveness and justice.'" Moses is telling the people never to forget it was at Sinai where God gave them the 10 commandments of love. he had written with his own finger. We also need to heed this counsel. God gave to Moses to give to the people. The Lord through Moses is also encouraging me to guard my life diligently and not to forget what I have seen and heard, and to bear witness in my own life to God's 10 Commandments of love. As I live that life, I will encounter many people, and I am encouraged to continue to live in love of these commandments. In Deuteronomy 13:4, Moses says, "Serve only the Lord your God and fear him alone. Obey his commands. Listen to his voice. Cling to him." I love that. We can cling to Jesus when we obey and listen to him calling, "Come to me, and I will give you rest." My friends, if you need rest, come to Jesus. He is the only one who can give you that rest that you are needing. So come today, is my prayer for you as you answer his call today. In his lovely name, amen.